Following's fourth fan, the new book needs to be recommended, bookmarked, clicked, thank you. I'm coming. On the top of Kyung Musatog Mountain in the middle section of Kunlun Mountain, white clouds are lingering, and the white snow on the top of the peak is in the same color. A voice full of excitement and joy shuttles through the clouds, mist, and white snow, spreading far away. If someone likes to challenge the mountains hears it, they may sigh empathy. I'm here, just like visiting here, it contains extraordinary and profound meaning. For every mountaineer challenger, it is the end and a new starting point. Looking down on the white mountains, the person who made the domineering declaration was a young man with a small head. He was sturdy and not too strong. His brows were like swords and his heroic spirit was compelling. Even though his eyes were slightly squinted, he could still vigorous vitality leaked from the gap. That was the look in the eyes that couldn't wait to rush to tomorrow. Or the sword eyebrow is too heroic, and the extreme of things must be reversed. The sword eyebrow on the right is broken, leaving scars caused by 3 sharp claws, and the man's lips are thinner, which weakens the heroic senses coming on the face, and the skin color is light. The color of wheat is more masculine. Generally speaking, he is handsome, but the slightly hideous scar on his right eyebrow slightly damaged the overall senses. This man is named Luo Lai, a gourmet who cannot be said in the ordinary sense. Compared with the identity of a gourmet, he is more like an adventurer who advocates the spirit of adventure. Standing on the highest point of Kyung Mustog Mountain, he opened his arms like a big peng spreading his wings, standing against the strong wind and ultra-low temperature air, squinting his eyes slightly, his face of enjoyment, as if embracing his eyes, which resisted human existence. The harsh environment. In terms of the altitude, the clothes listed on the body are terribly thin, just a thin black sportswear, and the same is true for the luggage. There is only a simple backpack, and it is not a professional mountaineering bag. This picture is a very strange scene in the eyes of any mountaineering enthusiast. In the middle section of the Kunlun Mountains, there are 8 peaks above 6,000 meters above sea level. One of them is the Kyung Mustog Mountain where the list is located. It is an iceberg with an elevation of 6,920 meters. At such a high altitude, not to mention the lack of oxygen, the temperature is conservatively estimated to reach -38 degrees. What is this concept? Spit a mouthful of water, it will freeze into ice before it hits the ground, but Luo Lai wears only thin sportswear, which is unobstructed from the torture of ultra-low temperature, and does not need the assistance of an oxygen bottle at all. Hey! Luo Lai exhaled a sigh of heat and blinked into frost. He crossed his eyebrows and looked at another group of peaks far in the distance. It seems that this is his destination, and the peak here is just a temporary mountaineering look. The land of the scenery. The unfrozen lake referred to by Uncle Adamu is above the highest peak. Although it is only a legend, the world is so big that there are no wonders. Luo Lai bent slightly, lifted the backpack at his feet, leaned on his shoulders, and jumped along the steep snow slope, turning into a dark shadow gliding on the steep covered with snow. This scene is really shocking. Fortunately no one has seen this scene, otherwise it will definitely be shocked. A year ago, Luo Lai sneered at the various legends weaved in words. He was an explorer, and he could only accept what he was looking for with his own eyes. But a year later, he firmly believed that everything has been passed down from ancient times to the present. The legends of non-frozen lake are not all groundless, such as the frozen lake only known to the older generation of Uyghurs. The turning point for was a year ago, when he almost died, and it was also when he welcomed a new life. There are countless high mountains in the Kunlun Mountains. Listed here only a year ago, he came to Waterloo for the first time when he came to Waterloo with the spirit of if you don't die, you won't die. This is an inevitable result, because he did not do everything well. There is no team support for his preparations. Even if his physical fitness is good, the failure of climbing is obvious. However, Luo Lai is a lucky person. When he was weak and fell from the hillside into the gorge while he was unconscious, he fell fortunately on a cliff protruding from the mountain because of a small emerald green tree growing here. The tree cushioned the impact of the fall, so that he did not immediately fall to death, but 4 ribs were broken, and his arms and thighs were also simply broken. Although he didn't fall directly to death, but the place he was in was so bad that he should not be able to do so, and with serious injuries, he could only wait for death. The so-called luck is reflected here. Just like the protagonist of the novel, there is an adventure if he survives a catastrophe. The small tree that offsets the falling force bears a crystal clear white fruit, only the size of a baby's fist. At that time, he thought that he would not be a starving ghost and tried his best to pick the fruit, no matter whether it was poisonous or not, just swallow it in one bite, so he survived. He never told anyone about this matter, because it was the root cause of the changes in his body. Descended the mountain in a superhuman manner, and Luolai reached out through his clothes and touched the jade hanging on his chest. He used it as a talisman, and he would touch it a few times after taking a risk. This jade was dug out from the stone wall where the rhizome of the little tree was. The whole body was as round as a stone, about the size of a quail egg, white as snow, transparent and clear, without the slightest lines. Luolai doesn't think this jade is a mortal thing. He even thinks that this jade is the culprit that gave birth to that kind of strange fruit. After swallowing that fruit, not only did his injury recover in a moment, but 1 day later, he could clearly feel the life energy free in his body, which seemed to be the perception ability that the fruit gave him. The anger that originated from the body seemed to be very weak, but Su was guided by life instincts, no one taught them, and Luolai mastered the method of how to make the life energy in the body stronger, and then radiate it out. Energetic will be more vigorous. Lists this method as qi training. He believes that the so-called qi is the breath of life energy. Not only does he have it, but it is as strong as a beast, mediocre like a human, and weak like an ant. The so-called ability is the same as the heart. Hid the secret of the adventure in his heart, and listed the dreams he had has now become a goal. He wants to set foot in the human forbidden zone, go to places that others have not seen, encounter things that others have not seen, and search for unknown food materials from others. A week later, he set foot on the peak of 7,500 meters above sea level. Amidst the mountains, a mirror-like lake appeared in front of him. The area is roughly estimated to be more than 20,000 ordinary meters, about the size of 50 basketball courts. It should be here, not freezing the lake. Looking at the calm lake with white clouds reflected in the sky, Luolai smiled in excitement, jumped down, followed the of snow accumulation, and soon came to the lake. The lake above the mountain is the spring of life in the eyes of creatures. The water in the lake is usually clear. There are always flocks of birds and birds nearby. Wild animals often appear. When the altitude is higher than 7,000 meters, there is nothing around the lake. Biological. The ice-free lake in the legends of Uyghur people is here. From the perspective of the topography, it is more like being located in a volcanic crater. The lake is hidden by the surrounding elevated peaks. If you don't climb higher peaks, it is difficult to find the lake here. Listen did not know the exact location of the ice-free lake. He walked through the mountains in one direction and found this lifeless lake in this crater-like terrain. It should freeze at such a low temperature, but... Luolai threw the backpack on his feet, squatted down, and reached out his hand into the water. It was cold to the touch, and he couldn't even touch the small ice slag. He smiled slightly, and his eyes flashed with brilliance. Is it a dead lake or a living lake? Let me see. An excitement surging in his chest, he directly took off his sportswear, revealing a dark-colored one-piece diving suit. He actually came prepared. Casually threw the clothes aside, bent down, and took out a headlamp shaped like a miner's lamp from the backpack. After turning it on, a concentrated beam of strong light shot into the distance. He tied the lamp to his forehead, took out an underwater camera and hung it around his neck, and a goggles. After making these preparations, he was not afraid of potential threats, and he did not bring an oxygen cylinder. Jumped directly into the lake. After entering the water, the lake was icy cold, like a layer of ice covering the body, but within the range that the list can bear. The lake is clear, and the lights can be illuminated far away, no water plants, no debris, no living things. It is reasonable to say that the lake is so clear, and the sun shines straight down, which should make the bottom of the water bright, but after Luo entered the water, he found that the bottom of the lake was actually dark and silent. I don't know if it is caused by the dark and silent lake bottom world, or the cold water temperature. Even with the list of supernatural powers, I can't help but feel a trace of chill quietly dissipating from my heart. I can't feel any breath, there should be no living things. Without using any tools, he dived to a depth of 200 meters. At this time, the light from the headlight finally reflected to the bottom. Okay. Gurgling bubbles came out of the listed mouth and nose. Is that the ruins? Seeing the light shining clearly, the eyes under the listed goggles suddenly widened, revealing a light of horror. How can there be ruins of buildings in a place like this? If this place is a desert or deep in a mountain, it is nothing, but it is at the bottom of a lake above 7,500 meters above sea level. Retaining the shocked emotions rising in his heart, Luo Lai continued to dive, and finally came to the architectural ruins at the bottom of the lake. Without hesitation, he picked up the camera and took several pictures in a row. This is an amazing discovery. Luo Lai thought excitedly. Before he could get a glimpse of the whole site, he was attracted by the unknown characters on a stone pillar. After he approached, he could see the unknown characters clearly with the light of his headlight. It looks like a hieroglyph. Luo Lai stretched out his hand and gently stroked the patterned words on the stone pillar, doubting in his mind. At this moment, Luo Lai's body suddenly shook. At some point, a breath of life that was too powerful to describe in words appeared out of thin air behind him. Listed's heartbeat speeded up suddenly, and immediately turned around. When there was no time to see anything, he was already in the boundless darkness. There is no pause or dormancy in the consciousness, and the feelings from the body are indescribable. It is like stepping on the ground in a moment of weightlessness in space. The momentary feeling is very strange, and it makes Luo Lai feel terrified. 1 second, he was in a heavy water pressure package, and the next second, he was directly covered by various hard objects emitting a foul smell. The same darkness, but already a different world. He didn't know what was going on. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com held his breath, tried to push away the hard object that was unknown to him, and crawled upward. No matter what happened, he was sure of one thing, that is, the place where he is now is not the bottom of the lake, but an unknown place. After climbing up a distance, he opened up something similar to an old-fashioned TV set, and the light poured into his eyes, causing Luo Lai to squint his eyes slightly. After a while, he got out of the light after he had adapted to the light. At this moment, he finally knew where he was, but it was a mountain of rubbish, and the thing he just pushed away was indeed an old-fashioned shabby TV. Here, where is it? Looking at the numerous garbage dumps emitting smoke, dust, and miasma, and the barren land farther away, with a blank expression. Suddenly, Luo Lai noticed the gaze from below, and immediately looked down. 3 people in white protective suits were looking up at him standing on the trash mountain. The gas mask covered him so that Luo Lai couldn't see clearly. The expressions of 3 people. Humans, protective clothing, garbage dumps. After seeing the 3 people's dresses clearly, Luo Lai suddenly jumped out of these 3 terms in his mind, unaware of the changes in his body. The sun shines through the smoke, dust, and miasma, and becomes faint. It is projected on the goggles on the protective suits of the 3 people below, reflecting a naked black-haired boy standing on the trash mountain staring at them. Although everything can be received here, including life and corpses, but about life, babies are always discarded here, and children about 10 years old are rarely seen. Seeing aloud to notice that the gaze cast by the person wearing the protective suit was a little strange, and Luo Lai lowered his head and glanced at his body, and it was exploded. Not wearing clothes is not the point. Tintin, who is slightly floating in the wind, is actually getting smaller. Lists a whole week for a whole week before reluctantly accepting the strange encounter that happened to him. He obviously found a construction site at the bottom of the ice-free lake, and as a result, a horrible aura appeared out of thin air. When his soul trembled, he appeared in the trash mountain inexplicably before his brain could move. What was even more painful was not a language barrier. But, he's getting smaller like Conan. Fortunately, Tintin has become smaller because his body has become smaller. Also because of his experience of swallowing fruits, his endurance has been greatly improved, so that when he comes to this world, his spirit will not be directly hit by a powerful force. A week is not short, and it is enough for him to accept the situation. Language problems should be solved first. Fortunately, the people here are kind. Sit on the wooden bed, touched the scar on his right eyebrow, and looked thoughtful. He still doesn't know that the world he's in is no longer the original Earth, he doesn't know what the name of the place is, and he can't know what a ridiculous word the evaluation of kindness is here. At that time, he encountered 3 people in protective clothing as soon as he got out of the trash mountain. Judging from their size, they could only be classified as children. The facts also proved his judgment, but he was not conscious at the beginning. He also became a child. Although I don't know where they are, and I don't know why these 3 people wear protective clothing and what they want to do when they come to the garbage dump. In short, when these 3 strangers speak, Luo Lai feels desperate from the bottom of his heart. What kind of bird language are you talking about? He was proficient in multiple languages, and at that time he could not understand what people in protective clothing said. Fortunately, despite the language barrier, one of the girls still expressed obvious kindness and brought him back to his normal human settlement. These behaviors have the listed kind evaluations. Of course, if they are brought here together, it would be better if the jade was not robbed by the girl. Listed the familiar scars on the right eyebrow, thinking about the jade robbed by the barbarian girl, and fell into habitual thinking. Based on the existing appearance and scars, he can be sure that he has become smaller, and his physical fitness has deteriorated with age. Fortunately, he can still feel the incalculable life energy in his body. This is his weapon, although now it is as weak as a flame about to be extinguished, but it is also a precious kind of flame. During this period of time, he has been worried about the disappearance of the fire in his body, because this will be the capital to support his survival after he comes to a strange world. Fortunately, the worry is superfluous. Although the life energy in the body has become weak, there is no signs of passing away. In short, while mastering the language, try to make the life energy in the body stronger, so as not to be powerless when encountering things. Luo Lai slowly closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and then gathered his mental energy to touch the weak life energy in his body, like a pair of gentle hands, gently rubbing an energy ball the size of a thumbnail. In the past week, he has been cultivating with a clear understanding of the current situation, but the progress has been almost zero. Although he does not know what the situation is, he still insists on doing this. At first, he could clearly perceive the life energy after swallowing the fruit, and then he used this method to cultivate. Although the effect was not significant, it did. After practicing for a whole year, his physical fitness has not only improved to the level of non-human, but he can also hold his breath for up to 20 minutes. However, since the body became smaller and then came to this strange world, the same way of cultivation did not seem to have progressed. Listed only as the reason for the smaller body, and didn't think much about it. Rubbed the life air mass for a full hour, without seeing the slightest change. Closed his eyes tightly. At this moment, a row of white fonts suddenly jumped out of the dark vision, like white smoke, erratic, but organized into obvious text. Power, unknown. Awakening degree, 0.5%. The weird text message suddenly appeared, so that Luo Lai suddenly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes and withdrew from the emotional calm state of mind, the font that seemed to appear in the consciousness disappeared like smoke. What the is this? When deep doubts appeared in the opened eyes, the old wooden door made a harsh creak and was pushed open. A girl with purple hair and golden eyes came in carrying 2 bowls of steaming porridge, and placed them on the simple wooden table. Then, she pointed to the porridge and said, "Eat." Simple syllables, simple meanings, but Lorelei can't understand them, but the girl points to the porridge with her fingers, and she always says the same things when they bring meals, so Lorelei probably knows that this means eat. Glanced over the girl's undeveloped flat chest, but saw the girl's eyesight reach out to protect the white jade hung in front of her chest, with a threatening look on her face. "This is the reward, it's mine already." The purple-haired girl's voice was tender and discriminating, and her serious expression seemed to announce the belonging of the jade. Lorelei didn't understand the girl's words at all, but it wasn't a good thing to think about it. He shrugged helplessly and didn't care. In his opinion, the jade was going to be brought back sooner or later, just picking up the bowl and drinking the bowl. Rice soup. I didn't wash the rice. When the tongue touched the rice soup, Lorelei sighed in his heart. As a foodie, the tongue that has been spoiled by so many delicacies has long been protesting, eating this kind of water and rice. The seriously imbalanced rice porridge is really a torture for him, but he is under the fence, so he is not qualified to force it. This is a bowl of porridge, very thin, with few grains of rice, and no side dishes, not even a small dish of dried radish. This is every meal of the week. Although the language is not fluent, and I don't dare to travel at will, the living standard can be roughly judged based on the small room where I live and every meal of the girl, and the garbage dump outside the street can be described as vivid. Soon, Lorelei finished the porridge and put the empty bowl on the table. The girl also finished the porridge. The two looked at each other, and the room suddenly became quiet. The girl is petite, about 10 years old, has short purple hair, very thin eyebrows, and the color of her eyes is a rare golden color, and she is very large and very energetic. The nose and mouth are slightly delicate, and she wears a similar outfit. The white dress of the judo suit, but the lower body is a short skirt style, and there is also a black tight shorts inside, which is longer than the one-piece short skirt. To be fair, this is a very cute little loli, enough to arouse the surging love of the majority of low ICN, but Lorelei is not low ICN, and he knows that this very cute little loli is not easy to provoke. Yes, not to mention anything else, in terms of physical strength, it is actually stronger than him. God knows how such a petite and cute little loli can have such a strong power. If it weren't for this reason, how could he be so passive that he couldn't even get back a jade? While staring at each other quietly, the girl suddenly took out a shabby book from her clothes, patted it on the table, and said, "Teach you to read." Did not understand the list, but he was not welcome, and opened the first page of the book directly. After seeing the words on the first page that looked like a pinion table, his eyes shrank slightly. He felt that the weird text was very familiar. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com seemed to have seen it somewhere. It seemed to be the text on the stone pillars on the bottom of the unfreezing lake. Thinking of this, Lorelei was startled, and calmly distinguished. It's a bit like, but not like it. By comparing the two characters, it is still possible to distinguish the difference between the two. Suppressed the doubts in his heart, Lorelei raised his head to look at the girl, pointed at the book, pointed at her, and finally pointed at herself, meaning to ask the other party if she wanted to teach herself literacy. The girl understood the meaning of Loyotaida and nodded slightly. "Hurry up, then." Lorelei's eyes lit up and spoke Chinese, but the girl didn't understand it at all. The girl doesn't care what language List is speaking. After all, there are more than 200 languages in the world. Maybe the language listed is one of them, and the language she wants to teach List is the universal language. Although the girl teaches mediocrely, Lorelei has mastered the language that he has never touched before at a very fast pace. He is very talented in language, and learning a new language is very efficient. It probably takes less than a month to master it thoroughly. The language of this world. When it was late at night, he finally knew the girl's name and where she was. The girl's name is March, and the place where she is now is called Meteor Street. If it's just Mackie or Meteor Street, Luo Lai still doesn't think there is anything, but when the two are accepted by him, a shocking wave suddenly rises in his heart. This is the world in the hunter. A picture of a woman with purple hair and golden eyes appeared in her mind, slowly overlapping with the girl in front of her. Maki, the world-famous theft gang, one of the members of the Phantom Brigade, has engaged in many murderous crimes all over the world, but it is not as harmless as it seems now. The night is as cool as water. In a room less than 30 square meters, the furniture is simple and not much. A wooden bed, a wooden cabinet, a wooden table, 2 wooden chairs, a chandelier, and a bathroom. This is what Maki owns. Residence. Lying on the wooden bed tossing and turning, Machi, lying on the sling bed, has already entered a stable state of sleep. When I first came to the room, the hammock was there, and the wooden bed was covered with a layer of ash, which shows that Marge did not sleep on the wooden bed very early. The hunter's world. Listed sideways, playing with the cold jade, not knowing whether to be afraid or excited. Maki's age is only 10 years old, but it fits very well with the image of purple hair and golden eyes in memory. Based on the name of the image and the term Meteor Street, Luo Lai confirmed his current situation. Although Maki's mental age is definitely higher than 10 years old, she is only a child after all. He is not a qualified teacher. Even with the assistance of books, he can't teach the common languages step by step, but he learns quickly, and he can learn it in half a day. Many nouns, including the names of both parties and the place name Meteor Street. Thanks to the language that finally had the basic communication conditions, Luo Lai was able to use the way of drawing pi, and promised to give March a huge sum of money in the future, and only then returned the jade. Hearing the big pie drawn by Luo Lai, Maki simply returned the jade to Luo Lai. I didn't think too much about the list. The girl who simply thought that this would be a member of the Phantom Brigade in the future was only a child after all. She hadn't experienced too much, so she would easily believe him. In fact, most of Maki's decisions are based on his own instincts, which is also the fundamental reason for taking Luo Lai home. Moreover, Luo Lai does not wear protective clothing, but can breathe freely in the exhaust gas environment in the garbage dump. It is also one of the reasons. In terms of strength alone, Luo Lai is weaker than herself, but Marge believes in her instincts. She believes that it would be a good thing to bring Luo Lai back. As for jade, she can only treat it as a good-looking stone, which can be exchanged for it. The promise is already earned. I have imagined that I would be happy to enter the world of hunters before. Why can't I be happy at all now? Listed in his heart with a sigh, and now he still doesn't know what the unidentified powerful aura he encountered at the bottom of the ice-free lake is, and how he came to this world inexplicably. When he was on the earth, he always felt that time was not enough, and he rarely watched anime, let alone manga. Because of his interest, the only anime he is interested in are only two, one is a full-time hunter, and the other is a captive of food. Because he is a foodie, a captive who likes food, because he is an explorer with a strong curiosity about the unknown, he likes a full-time hunter. If you remember correctly, there is a food hunter in the hunter occupation category. Although I don't know whether the food in this world is rich in the world of captives, but since there are food hunters, presumably even if there is no food, the world of captives is rich. Compared with the earth, it is definitely a world. This is where the excitement of listing lies, even overwhelming the anxiety and fear after coming to a strange world. Not to mention the various rare ingredients that exist in the unknown on the earth, and the secrets that have not been explained in various animations, these are full of fatal attractions for Luo Lai. Gen Beast, Warcraft. Treasures, secret treasures. Mystery, Demon Realm. These strange things that only exist in the imagination, like a blank scroll, slowly unfold in front of him, waiting for him to swiftly paint. Thinking of this, Luo Lai's mood gradually calmed down. While on the earth, he once regarded stepping in the 10 restricted areas of mankind as a dream, and gaining strength after an adventure, he regarded it as a goal. If ordinary people suddenly gain powerful power, they are easily controlled by desire, but Luo Lai regards this power as a motivation to pursue unknown places and unknown ingredients. He is an explorer with an adventurous spirit and a pure foodie. While possessing superb cooking skills, he also pursues various ingredients that are difficult to appear on the table. Because of the special experience and goals, after thinking about some things clearly, I easily accepted the situation. Although the wandering when a person was on the earth has just begun, and he came to the hunter's world inexplicably, the unknown here is far more abundant than the earth. Fortunately, it is good, but the level of danger is far higher than that of the earth. Fortunately, I probably remember the principle of chanting ability and the method of practice. Luo Lai slowly closed his eyes. Right now, he just wanted to master his power as soon as possible. This is the basis for being able to gain a foothold in the hunter world. In the quiet night, he couldn't sleep, he began to think about the ability to think, and for a while, he temporarily forgot the weak life energy in his body. Knowing that this is the world of a full-time hunter, he thought of the thought ability that derives all kinds of changes, and he didn't know what department he belonged to, and what his ability was. Just when the thought was touched, the erratic font suddenly appeared in the consciousness again, but it was the font that appeared during the day when practicing. At this time, Luo Lai was not surprised at all, and calmly accepted the appearance of the font. Is not only caused by an experience, but he thinks that no matter how strange things are, it is nothing. After all, it is strange enough for him to come to the world of full-time hunters. Level, ordinary people. Strength, ability to read. Department, unknown. UU reading www.uuganshu.com Awakening degree, 0.5% changed. Seeing the white smoke font reappearing, Luo Lai was slightly surprised. Although he glanced at it during the day, he clearly remembered that there was no rank in the white smoke font, the power display was unknown, and there was no other word. Is it because my cognition has more ability to read? Listing and thinking is to add the department to the cognition of the ability of mind. Just started thinking, but saw that the white smoke font has changed again. Level, ordinary people strength, ability to read. Strengthening system, awakening degree 0%. Release system, awakening degree 0%. Change system, the degree of awakening is 0%. Control system, awakening degree 0%. With the current system, awakening degree 0%. Trait, awakening degree 0.5%. Looking at the white smoke font, I was surprised by the list. Although I don't know the basic principle of this phenomenon, it should be a good thing to do. Only the awakening level of the trait type is 0.5%, does that mean I am a trait type? Luo Lai thought silently, the only thought at this time was how to improve the cultivation ability of thinking. He remembered that a wetland in the hunter's exam was full of dangers. People with strong bodies could not avoid danger. Only the ability to think is the root of the power. Although I don't know what this font is about, the display of the level of awakening can provide me with a clear indicator. All I have to do is to practice hard to improve the level of awakening. Listen muttered to himself in a low voice. The will to practice was very firm. At this moment, he suddenly felt an astonishing heat from the jade in the palm of his hand, enough to melt the palm of his hand instantly. Ming Ming is like putting his hands in the tumbling molten slurry, but there is no pain, the feeling is strange and contradictory. Tactile cognition shows that this is the heat that can easily melt the palm of the hand, but it did not produce any pain, so when the heat was generated, Luo Lai did not exclaim. My heartbeat speeds up involuntarily. Laid out his hands cautiously, and the faint moonlight projected through the window, saw no change on the surface of the jade, but he could feel the special life energy fluctuations from the jade, and passed into the body through his palm. If he has mastered the condensation in mind skills, he can condense chi in his eyes and see the massive aura entwined on the surface of the jade. However, he is only a layman, so naturally he can't see the aura floating on the surface of the jade. Although I can't see the aura, Luo Lai can perceive the fluctuations of the aura emanating from the jade, which is the same source as the life energy in the body. As more and more life energy is introduced into the body by the jade, the white smoke in the silently floating font in the consciousness has changed again. The numbers of the awakening levels of the 6 major departments have changed a bit. Except for the traits, the awakenings of the other departments have changed from 0% to 0.1%, and then they stand still, while the awakenings of the traits jumped from 0.5 to 0.6. Has jumped to 3 before it stops. After the numbers were still, the strange burning sensation from the jade gradually disappeared, and no breath fluctuations were felt anymore, as if a living thing had become a dead thing. Facing this sudden change, he was confused, but he knew that he had gained a lot of benefits. Not only did the trait system awakening level reach 3%, but the life energy in the body was significantly stronger, from the original thumb size. It became the size of a table tennis ball, and began to leak threads from all over the body to the outside world. This jade. While pinching the jade, he can clearly feel the life energy radiating from the body. If a person with the ability to mind sees this scene, he will most likely be shocked. An ordinary person who has not undergone systematic training and used his body to withstand the attack formed by Qi has actually opened his sperm hole in a short period of time. This should be categorized as a natural mindful person. In fact, Luo Lai has become a unique person with special thought ability in this world at this moment. The data displayed in white smoke contains the essence that can make every thought ability person mad and greedy, and it also makes Luo Lai have unlimited possibilities. Sex. This is equivalent to a treasure that he has inestimable value, but he himself did not realize this. Before the treasure was unearthed, no one would realize the particularity and talents listed. Trait: I don't know what my ability to read. The awakening level of the trait shown in the white smoke font has changed to 3%. The dim light in the eyes of Luo Lai flickers, and the other 0.1% is directly ignored by him. He wanted to follow his heart, and the strands of air leaking from the fine hole in the right palm area were actually left on the center of his right palm. Without systematic training, only relying on the previous life to watch anime, leading to such a remnant thought in the memory and consciousness, completed the entanglement, one of the 4 basic skills of the mind ability. Although it is only a palm range, it is true. It is the technique of wrapping. If you want to know what your ability to think is, you have to master the technique of Fa, and Luo Lai did not master this technique, but he has this concept. In the room favored by the faint moonlight, a soft white light slowly lit up. Luo Lai left the qi on his right palm for about 30 seconds. The amount of qi became more and more. It was a white light sphere condensed on the palm of the palm. The brightness of the light was very soft, and it looked like a transparent small ball. Is this my ability, or is it pure breath? The cognition of mindfulness is at a semi-destructive level, and it is impossible to distinguish whether this is the ability of his trait system or the form of qi. There is a thought in his head that he wants to see what his ability to think is, so without mastering the practice, he wants to use Fa to show the ability of mind. At this time, it may be a vague thought that caused the steady white sphere to tremble without warning. Okay. Listed in surprise, before he could react, he only felt that the originally calm sphere in his palm suddenly turned into a wild horse. The white sphere resembles a spring compressed to the extreme, and it suddenly ejects from the palms of the row, but it presents a very contradictory phenomenon. Its flying speed is very slow, about the speed of an adult walking. The sphere flew to March lying on the hammock so desperately. Oops! Luo Lai's heartbeat speeded up suddenly, but there was no time to stop it, because his control of qi was terribly weak. The white sphere fell on Maggie's body, and suddenly became a thin curtain of light covering the surface of Maggie's body. The light was very weak, like a transparent silk curtain. The next second, I saw that the pajamas and underwear worn by Ma Chi suddenly separated in an unbelievable manner, slowly falling to the ground, and the light curtain disappeared. Looking at this scene, Luo Lai's mouth twitched slightly. Is this my ability to read? The speed of light stripped off little Lolita's clothes? This must be fake. Yes, I must have used a fake thought ability. The painful speculation emerged from the bottom of my heart. Even though the self-hypnosis was very firm, the cruel reality was still exchanged for an autumn wind-like sigh. The list of shallow understanding of mindfulness does not consider that one's own mastery of mindfulness is only a layman. Moreover, the characteristics of mindfulness are affected by personal will and needs are divided into potential needs and apparent needs. Potential needs are needs that the individual does not realize, while obvious needs are clearly conscious needs. Obviously, the ability to separate clothes was derived from the potential demand without being aware of the situation. In other words, this ability to separate clothes seems cruel to nail the listing to the pervert frame. UU reading www.uukonshu.com. Fortunately, listing is not clear about this, otherwise he would never admit it to death. In fact, this ability to think is reflected in the separation of clothes from the human body in an instant. It is indeed very weak, but if it is not clothes that are separated, but any part of the body? Moreover, a beginner who has just stepped on the threshold did not use practice, but used a half-tangle drap to use his own reading, which is simply against common sense. If you say it, you will definitely not have the ability to think. People will believe. At this time, Listing did not think so deeply. While lamenting, he couldn't help but be attracted by March's naked body. When normal people see the naked body of the opposite sex, no matter whether the motivation is pure or not, they will look at it reflexively. Under the faint moonlight, Liao Lai barely looked at March's body with this eye. The skin was very white and the chest was very flat. There was nothing to expect. His thin body showed rows of bones. Beasts. Luo Lai suddenly realized that March was only 9-year-old Lori, so she forcibly turned her head and rolled over, as if nothing happened. After a while, maybe she felt cool because she had no clothes. Marky slowly opened her eyes. When her consciousness changed from sleeping to clear, she immediately noticed that all her clothes, including underwear, were missing. Maki's expression became cold, and with a quick movement of his hands, he pulled out a thin line. Moonlight projected on the thin line, flashing with a faint luster, giving off a hint of chill. She glanced at the list lying on the bed with her back facing her. Her slender eyebrows were slightly furrowed, although her clothes were missing, her expression was more calm and suspicious. Loretta deliberately turned over and adjusted to a sleeping position facing the wall so that his back was facing Ma Chi, and the measures he took were timely, because a few seconds after he turned over, Ma Chi woke up, and it also showed a thin line that looks dangerous. Poor milk, ribs. Listen wanted to reach out and rub his slightly aching temples at this time, but at this moment, he didn't dare to move. If Marge suddenly woke up, how could he explain it? So pretending to sleep is the most correct choice now. God knows what kind of ghostly ability this is. After taking off his hands, he even stripped Maki's clothes. Also, how can the ability to read so easily be released? Is it because the rows of data that appear in your head are caused by the ghosts? At this moment, the thinking Luo Lai hadn't noticed that Margie had not only woken up, but was also staring at him. This can't be blamed on him, because as far as common sense is concerned, Margie woke up and found that her clothes were missing. The first reaction must be screaming. Before hearing the scream, Marge should be still asleep. Fortunately, Marge was not hurt. After thinking about it, Luo Lai was very lucky. When the transparent sphere took off and flew towards Marge, Luo Lai panicked. If Marge was hurt, he would definitely not be able to forgive himself. Fortunately, he just took off his clothes, just took off the clothes. Luo Lai shook his head slightly, threw the bad thoughts out of his head, squinted his eyes and stared at the cocky rough wall. Before his eyes flashed the picture of Mackie's skinny figure, and suddenly sighed softly in his heart. Has lost ribs. It must be caused by chronic malnutrition. This shows that Mackie's usual living conditions are not good, but he took him home as an outsider and gave him half of his daily food. When I thought of this, the overlapping images in my mind slowly separated. That March, who exists in memory, is a member of the Phantom Brigade. He is cold and ruthless, killing people without blinking, and is completely different from the little Lolita who has been together for a week now. Time is really a pickling knife, and it's just to turn such a kind little loli into a wicked person. What did you do? The movement of Luo Lai's subconscious shaking her head was noticed by Marge. She calmly jumped out of the hammock, picked up the clothes on the ground and quickly put it on, and then looked at Luo Lai's back. It's not normal for a 10-year-old girl to react like this, but if this is Meteor Street, it makes sense. Maki felt that his clothes, including underwear, had been taken off, but his heart jumped slightly, but he didn't react excessively. He just wondered if he was stripped naked without noticing it. After all, she knows that her sleep level is not deep, probably in the second stage of sleep level, and has not reached deep sleep. If someone undresses her, she must wake up as soon as possible. Doubts could not be answered reasonably, so she suspected that they were listed in the same room. After hearing Marge's words, Luo Lai's body stiffened slightly, decisively pretending to be asleep, without any reaction at all. Maki raised his brows slightly, and after a moment of silence, he turned on the hammock, closed his eyes and continued to sleep, without insisting on pursuing the matter. Her intuition told her that the clothes on her body must have something to do with the listing, but even if she moved the hammock a little bit, she would wake up as soon as possible, let alone take off her clothes. Is too weird. Therefore, Marge did not insist on pursuing the matter, and the answer he wanted to know would always be known, as long as the list was always there. It's very risky. After hearing nothing, Luo Lai breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. After waiting for almost 10 minutes, Lai condensed the idea of continuing to try his ability to read, and turned to ponder the white smoke font that appeared in his consciousness. He could not study the special jade in his hand. He only felt that it was an extraordinary thing. Subconsciously, Luo Lai believed that the white smoke font appeared in his consciousness was probably because of this jade. I just absorbed the energy of jade like a star-absorbing method, and verified this guess from the side, but I don't know what effect the white smoke font in my consciousness has. After putting away the jade carefully, he closed his eyes to calm his emotions, and then concentrated. In the dark field of vision, white smoke like clear and erratic fonts instantly appeared, and the regular names and data resembled the attribute maps of the characters in the game. Because the list has absorbed the energy of jade, the arousal level of the trait system has directly soared to 3%, and the arousal level of other systems has increased from 0% to 0.1%, and the data and body changes are carried out simultaneously. The list of understanding of the ability of mind is relatively superficial, and there is no clear signpost as the direction of thinking, so no matter how he thinks, it is of no benefit. But the changes that took place in a short period of time tonight still gave him a lot of strange ideas. No matter what effect the white smoke font data has, at least the indicators can be set so that he will not go the wrong way. There are so many rare and exotic treasures in the hunter's world, and there may be exotic treasures like jade. Assuming I can absorb the inherent energy of these exotic treasures, it would be a way to quickly improve my strength. There are also various dangerous creatures that can grow into that way. There must be vigorous life energy in my body. If my hands can absorb those life energy. Even if these two assumptions are not true, I can already feel the chi in my body now, so I have a foundation for cultivation. As long as I practice slowly and down to earth, I will definitely become stronger. There is another way if you want to be quick, and that is to participate in the Hunter test. Once the Hunter test is passed, the Hunter Association will arrange for a master to teach the ability. But the Hunter test is very dangerous, and the possibility of losing his life is extremely high. I won't try it easily before I'm not sure. So, for now, I still need to learn how to manipulate the air first, and I definitely don't agree that my mind can only be used to pick up clothes. Listed out 2 hypotheses for rapid increase in strength, and also thought of the Hunter test. Before the hypothesis was verified, he would not easily participate in the Hunter test. Only down-to-earth training is the best choice now. In the middle of the night, everything is quiet. Listen to abandon the extra thoughts, concentrate and start trying to manipulate the faint chi that overflows from the sperm hole. Perceive the existence of venting chi, and turn the spirit into hands to manipulate chi. This kind of thing has actually been done hundreds of times. This is quite similar to when you were practicing on the earth. At this time, I tried it and I was familiar with it. The second hand of the clock kept moving, and in less than 10 minutes, the air escaping from the body began to remain on the listed body surface for a small amount. This is the result of the trial. Such a rapid progress, placed in countless thought abilities, is a rare genius. After the results have been achieved, Luo Lai feels slightly excited, as if a person lost in the jungle has finally found the right direction. Excitement and excitement are inevitable. Knowing winding, Mingju, after practice, to hair. These are the 4 basic skills for the ability-minded person, and the skills that are practiced in the list are entanglement. The life energy in the human body is the chi, which is slowly lost from every position on the body all the time. It can be considered that this is the loss of lifespan, and the entanglement is to keep the lost chi on the body. Therefore, people with high abilities tend to live longer. A little bit of time goes by, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com lists like a child who has found a toy. The interest in practice is getting more and more high, completely ignoring the slow lapse of time, until the spirit begins to be exhausted, and then enters unconsciously. Sleep state. When he was asleep, a thin white smoke appeared in the dark and silent consciousness space, as dazzling as light. The white smoke is like dough being flattened into a dough, and then twisted and transformed, protruding rows of text from the dough. Coordinates change, start calibration checking, conditions are met. Unable to swallow unknown mistake failed to control, the constantly changing white smoke font disappeared instantly as if it had been erased by an eraser. Listed in a deep sleep and didn't know that he had escaped a catastrophe. A system with autonomous consciousness didn't know when it started, and it was implanted in his body like a parasite. Perhaps because of the world shift, the unknown system made a judgment that swallowed the listed consciousness and manipulated it based on the existing multiple factors, but failed inexplicably, and the autonomy was wiped out, leaving only pure auxiliary functions. In this way, the list saved a risk in his sleep and gained benefits, but he still doesn't know this, and without system guidance, he would not know what the so-called auxiliary function is. I can only rely on my own experience to dig slowly. There is no doubt that this change from calm to calm brings unknown and unexplained benefits to the list. This will be his capital for breaking into this world. At noon the next day, Luo Lai suddenly opened his eyes and got up from the bed, but he was refreshed. Maki is not in the room, I don't know where he went. Luo Lai raised his head and glanced at the old clock on the wall. Only then did he realize that it was past 12 noon. Gurulu. There was a serious protest in the belly that the amount of rice soup per meal was too small. Luo Lai touched his stomach, got out of bed, and saw a bowl of rice soup on the table, thinking that it was Marge who had prepared it before going out. Looked at the bowl of rice soup silently for a long time, and Luo Lai felt warm, and at the same time he thought of Marge more than 10 years later. Such a cute and kind little loli, she must not be made a member of the Phantom Brigade in the future. The little loli development plan starts now. Luo Lai made up his mind secretly, and went into the bathroom to wash briefly, and then swallowed a few mouthfuls of cold rice soup to relieve the hunger in the abdomen. After the rice soup, his stomach became less uncomfortable. In the following time, Luo Lai began to practice again. Knows the dangers of the hunter world, so only strength can be a shield to protect oneself, and only strength can be a weapon to get what you want. When he touched the threshold of mindfulness, no matter whether the direction of cultivation was correct or not, he used his own cognition and methods to step by step to increase the degree of manipulation of qi. If we distinguish the levels of those who are capable of thinking, they are knowing the subtle, knowing, manipulating, controlling, superb. Highway has a clear understanding of qi. Mind is able to feel the presence of qi. It can also be said to open the fine pores to increase the number of airflows. Manipulation is the entry point for those with the ability to think. Realm. The realm of manipulation is a dividing line. Only those who can manipulate qi can be called those with the ability to think. The higher level is the realm of first-class masters. The higher the control of qi, the more qi fluency and offensive and defensive transitions will be. Handy. Most people with mental abilities are in the realm of manipulation. According to the degree of manipulation, these people with mental abilities can be divided into 3 levels: high, middle and low. Similarly, even if they reach the realm of control, they can also be divided into levels. In fact, there is no clear level distinction among those with abilities, nor can the final result of a battle be judged by level alone. After all, the mastery of scheming qi and the quantity and quality of qi are not mentioned. The 6 major elements don't be able to defensible against the strange thought abilities derived from it, let alone the factors that can affect the strength of the time and place. The list belongs to a rookie who has just stepped into the realm of manipulation, not even a low of L1, but as a traverser, without human guidance, he directly crossed the 2 steps of knowledge and understanding, as if one is not yet a baby who can crawl and has already started running. The foundation cannot be rooted. Even if you learn to run in an ultra-short time with a genius posture, you will surely fall terribly when you are about to fly, but the auxiliary system that exists in the list of consciousness may be able to hide the disadvantages. For income. To some extent, the list of unique systems in the consciousness can be said to be an outlier among those with abilities. Even if the path is wrong, it will not necessarily lead to a dead end. The current list hasn't considered too much. His whole mind is on how to strengthen the manipulation of qi. The first practice technique is the entanglement among the 4 foundations. At the very least, he has to learn how to manipulate his breath before he will explore what his ability to think of taking off Mackie's clothes and underwear at that moment. I just hope that the unknown ability of thinking is not so low that it can only be used to pick up clothes. That's it. When March is not at home, he lists almost all of his time for spiritual practice, and when March returns, he teaches him the common language. Time goes by day, but the meal every day is always a bowl of rice soup without any side dishes. Every time he eats, Luo Lai thinks of Mackie's thin body hidden under his clothes, and makes a secret decision, that is, after mastering the language and understanding the current situation of Meteor Street, the first thing is to improve the food. Time flies quickly. After half a month, Luo Lai has been able to stably retain the qi in the upper body, and under Mackie's poor teaching, he has basically mastered the lingua franca of this world, and will ask about Meteor Street from time to time. Now, I have a basic understanding of Meteor Street. Meteor Street, a wasteland fill area, as early as 1,500 years ago, this place was positioned as a garbage dump. In this place, any country is allowed to discard anything here. Garbage, corpses, babies, industrial waste, anything that is considered useless can be discarded here. Although the place outside Meteor Street is basically full of garbage, the streets in Meteor Street are clean and simple. The building complex is mainly yellow and white, and the materials used are not bad. If you skim the garbage dump outside Meteor Street regardless, this will be a normal town. The residents living in Meteor Street are all abandoned people, and they are also the world's dark households. It is impossible to find any birth information. The residents here mainly rely on the recyclable materials in the garbage dump for their livelihood. However, such a large amount of garbage includes industrial waste, hazardous materials that failed chemical experiments, and various substances harmful to the human body. Therefore, if you want to try your luck at the garbage dump, you need a full range of protective clothing. This is why Machi wears protective clothing when going to the garbage dump. Self-reliance is the basic condition for survival here. Even if you are a helpless child, you will not get any privileges. This kind of environment is an alternative to the survival of the fittest. On the 24th day when Luo Lai came here, maybe it was the rice that was eaten. On this day, Maki put on protective clothing again, and prepared to go to the garbage dump to find valuable supplies, and then use it in exchange for food. Luo, starting from today, I won't provide you with food anymore. If you don't want to starve to death, just go to the landfill with me. Margie in protective clothing calmly looked at Luo Lai. This time, Margie didn't seem to plan to go out alone. The name Lu Lai is extremely difficult to pronounce in common language. If it is a single word, it becomes very easy to hear. Therefore, Luo Lai simply cut off Lai and changed the name to a single character surname. I was impatient to wait a long time ago. Luo smiled slightly, twisted his neck and made a clicking noise. He had been in the room before, mainly because of his unfamiliarity with the environment and language barriers. Now he has no such worries. I just want to go out and have a look. Besides, eating rice soup every day, he couldn't stand it very early. Seeing the excited Luo, Maki's eyes flashed lightly, nodded slightly, picked up the gas mask hung on the wall, and then walked towards the door. You owe me food for 24 days. You charge 3 times the interest. The accommodation fee is waived. Oh, the redemption fee of the stone will be calculated separately. After a few steps, March suddenly stopped in front of the door. Luo heard this, several black lines suddenly hung on his forehead, and said helplessly, "Okay, well, and also, it's not called a stone, it's called a jade." Oh! Maki reacted coldly and opened the door directly and walked out. Luo patted his forehead to express helplessness, so he followed. The residents of Meteor Street live on the waste in the landfill, and Luo does not resist this. On the contrary, he just wants to improve the food conditions as soon as possible. This is not only for myself, but also for March. Please recommend. The population of Meteor Street is close to 10 million. The architectural composition is a cross. There are 4 broad and straight streets, each of which is the main street, divided into 4 areas. Here, there is no government system interference. The entire Meteor Street is managed by the Council of Elders, and there are a total of 4 elders in the council, which govern the 4 regions, respectively, in the south, east, and northwest. Although there are factions, there is no faction dispute. Maki's residence is located in the West Street area. As long as you pass through a narrow alley, you can come to the main road of West Street. You will reach the exit of Meteor Street until the end. The outside of the city is full of rubbish. You will see it from time to time. Trucks came in from the outside, and then dumped the garbage unscrupulously. Luo and March walked side by side and came to the main road of West Street. There are many people on the street. When they saw Luo, they all cast contempt at him. Some people even spit on him, but did not make any more outrageous behavior afterwards. What's the situation? The hostility shown by the residents along the way makes Luo very baffled. Is it because he is an outsider? But Meteor Street can accept anything, there is no reason to resist him. Is it because he is not a baby? And, if it is to resist his arrival, then he will not be so calm for the past 20 days. Maki, what's the matter with them? Luo was puzzled and a little furious. He quietly narrowed the distance with Maki and asked in a low voice. Maki glanced at him and said faintly, "They don't know your situation, because you stay in my house and never leave the house, so you are treated as a little boy. Self-reliance is the basic quality of survival in Meteor Street. From the moment of being abandoned here, the idea of self-reliance has been etched into the bone marrow. Even babies who have lost their limbs since birth will be able to find survival by the age of 4 or 5. Methods, let alone people with sound limbs, and age is not the right to act like a baby. In this kind of environment, it is not surprising that Luo Hui, who has been hiding in March's house for nearly a month, was spitting. If he is a person with a hot temper and a straightforward personality, it is estimated that Luo Song's muscles and bones will be loosened if nothing is said. Little Bai Lian. Luo's mouth twitched. To be honest, the 3 words Xiao Bai Lian were uttered in such a plain tone by a little lowly, and there was a very strange feeling, but he couldn't refute it. Luo gave a wry smile, and habitually stretched out his index finger and rubbed his forehead, really wanting to slap these unidentified guys down, but this didn't change anything. I was thinking about improving the food first, but now it seems that I have to take off the little white face hat first. Luo curled his lips, and within a few days, he would use actions to let them know how much Macy picked him back. A wise choice, Baba, is not a pick, but an invitation. The mood gradually calmed down, and Luo stopped paying attention to the surrounding eyes. Maki looked at Luo, who was calm, and raised her eyebrows. She never asked Luo's origins, because Meteor Street would not refuse anything and naturally would not care about it. However, she felt that Luo was about the same age as herself, and she was indifferent in the face of so many contemptuous gazes. It seemed that she lacked the spirit that this age group should have. How could Marge think that Luo, who seemed to be a teenager, had the soul of an adult stuffed into it? "Aren't you angry?" Marge asked. "Hey, how could I care about these short-sighted people?" Luo Vinian shrugged freely, but suddenly saw a middle-aged man in a short-sleeved shirt pointing his up at him. His face suddenly turned dark. International gestures can be eaten no matter where they are. Luo did not say a word, he replied with a middle finger. Ma Chi silently looked at Robbie's gestures, and then at the middle-aged man, her eyes condensed slightly. When the middle-aged man saw Luo's movements, his face showed anger, but there was a treacherous look in the depths of his eyes, and the tiger was coming towards Luo. "Maki, if he does it first, shouldn't it be okay if I hit him on the ground?" Luo looked at the angry middle-aged man, just as he wanted to test the results of his practice in the past half-month. "Your strength is not even better than me, and you want to beat him?" Maki thought silently, without answering Luo's question, but a few steps directly in front of Luo, and then quietly looked at the middle-aged man. Seeing March's actions, Luo was slightly taken aback. Although he was very moved that March was willing to help him prevent trouble, how could he hide behind a little girl? When the residents of Meteor Street around saw it, they all looked ready to watch the show, and they saw Luo hiding behind March, and their views and positioning of Luo were directly elevated to the position of waste. What they think at this time is that they want to see the middle-aged man educate Luo well. If it weren't for the iron that won't hurt the lives of his compatriots in Meteor Street, it would be on the table, otherwise they really want the middle-aged man to turn Luo's head with one hand, so as not to be an eyesore. Meteor Street residents seem to have very good physical fitness. This middle-aged man is tall and sturdy, standing in front of March, a full upper body. The middle-aged man's eyes were slightly mimicked, he squeezed his finger bones hard, made a click, and said coldly, "Maki, this is my business in him." Maki silently pulled a thin fishing line from between his hands, and answered the middle-aged man with action. This middle-aged man is called Marza, and he has a bit of grudge with her. She also knows that the other person is really looking for trouble. She hasn't done anything the first few times. This time, she must not be able to bear it. My strength and Marzabi are absolutely inferior. I can't be hit by him, nor can I resist hard. The fault tolerance rate is too high, so I have to find a way to wrap his bottom plate with a thread first, and limit some of his mobility. Can let go of the attack. March's thoughts turned quickly. Don't let it go, it means you have taken the matter down. Marzawai's eyes slowly opened, revealing a cold smile. It has nothing to do with him. March said flatly. Malza's eyes were cold, and he threw a fist towards Marky without warning. There was no feeling of pity and jade, and there was also the meaning of sneak attack in it. Maki's eyes shrank suddenly. Yu reading www.yuuganshu. CM The fist was big enough to make a casserole, and the speed of his fists was not fast enough to react, but Marza suddenly punched out, and the distance between the two sides was close. Even though March was ready to fight, he could not make a dodge action in time. I can only stop it hard. Thoughts flashed through his mind like lightning, and March decisively gave up the idea of dodge hastily, and directly raised her delicate arms and crossed them in front of her. A look of contempt flashed in Mal's eyes. At this time, Luo suddenly moved, and as he came to the top, he quickly pushed March away. Pushed by Luo, March's body fell to the right. She opened her eyes wide and looked at Luo with a calm face. At this time, the thought in her mind was, is this guy tired of life? Fist crossed Maki and went straight towards Luo. Looking for death. Marza grinned with yellow teeth. Boom! With a dull sound, Marza Casserole's big fist stopped, and a small hand made it difficult for his fist to make an inch. Hey! Marza was taken aback. The people watching the excitement around were also taken aback. The little white face they thought blocked Marza's fist and looked very relaxed. Are all people from West Street, so everyone on the lookout knows that Marza's power is not small, but his fist is so easily received? Luo's upper body was covered with a thin layer of qi. Not only did he feel no pain after catching Marza's fist, but he also didn't feel any pressure, thinking that the half-month training was still very useful. Uncle, this punch is so powerful. Luo chuckled, this claimed praise was full of ridicule. You kid. Marza gritted his teeth, his eyes were about to breathe fire, he felt ashamed. As long as you make a step-by-step approach, anyone can learn to read. In other words, there is no threshold for the cultivation of the ability to read. As long as you master the method of practice, anyone can learn to read. However, reading is broad and profound, and it is not difficult to learn, but it is difficult to master it. Luo is not a reckless person, and there are two reasons for responding to Marza's provocation. One is that he wants to verify the effect of Tang, and the other is that he can feel that Marza's qi overflowing from his body is extremely small, still in the ranks of ordinary people. The result of verification is that Luo easily caught the fist that looked good with power, so he was satisfied, but Marza was very unhappy. Smelly kid, die to Lao Tzu. Marza didn't want to think about why his full-strength fist could be easily blocked. Under the eyes of everyone, he only felt the unbearable shame, he just wanted to hammer Luo into minced meat with one punch. The endless thoughts of human beings can give them ideas far beyond their ability. For example, at this moment, Marza's power is very strong, but it is absolutely impossible to hammer Luo into minced meat with a punch. However, when the purest malice is put into action, it sometimes breaks the limit of oneself a little bit. At this moment, the malice that Marza emerged from his heart turned into killing intent. He really wanted to kill Luo. Maybe he still regarded Luo as an outsider, so he didn't care about one of the iron rules of Meteor Street. If this punch full of killing intent is implemented, it can hurt Luo, who covers the upper body with a thin layer of qi. Luo realized the danger. This was a very obvious contrast. The first punch that seemed to be full was obviously not so good, but the second punch that Marza hammered down contained a feeling that made him very unpleasant. Is because he wants my life? At this very dangerous moment, Luo actually fell into thinking, and time seemed to stagnate at this moment. He was thinking about the dispute caused by a middle finger. Why would the other party have the idea of killing him? Because this is Meteor Street? Or is the strong man in front of him a brutal person himself? Then, when the opponent wants to kill himself, what level of counterattack must he make? To return to the other body? Around, about 80 residents of Meteor Street were watching the excitement. When they saw that Marza seemed to lose his mind and wanted to kill the little white face, they all showed excitement. Luo. After staggering for a few steps, Ma Chi stabilized his figure. Seeing that Luo had no reaction to Marza's murderous punch, he suddenly became anxious. At this moment, she didn't realize why she would be anxious for Luo, who had met Luo not long ago. Perhaps it was because Luo still owed her a lot of money for meals, or she thought Luo hadn't brought her due value. Luo's thinking reached the answer in less than 0.5 seconds. The other party did want to kill him, no doubt about that, but he didn't intend to pay him back. Because the other party is just an ordinary person, the result of his thinking is for ordinary people. He gave two choices: 1, to withstand the opponent's punch, and then abolish the opponent, and second, as long as the opponent stops, then forgive the opponent. Even if one day, under compelling circumstances, the hands are covered with blood of the same kind, at the very least, the motive for this result cannot be this moment. Just because of a terribly cheap dispute is going to die, that is undoubtedly belittle the value of my own thoughts. It's like, in the absence of tools, you will not hesitate to use your hands to process the ingredients in order to eat delicious food. It will be stained with a strong fishy smell and will cause many subtle cuts on your hands. However, it turned out to be digging up a lump of stool, which is uncomfortable. Stop! Luo raised his head, facing the fist that brought the wind. His eyes were cold. Tongue to declare the idea to the mouth. When Marza met Luo's cold and deep eyes, a chill of frozen bones suddenly eroded his whole body. In just a few moments, he came to a conclusion that if he does not restrain his inner anger, when his fist reaches the end, he will die. So, this inexplicable conclusion made Marza, who didn't want to die, forcibly stopped his fist. At this time, the fist was only a few centimeters away from Luo's eyes, and from the beginning to the end, Luo calmly stared at the fist. His expression did not show any waves. Because of being so close, Luo could see that Marza's fist was trembling slightly, and the amplitude continued to increase. Is only the lingering sound caused by the short word stop, like a sledgehammer struck a big bell at all costs, and the terrifying noise produced messes up Marza's thoughts. In fear. Marza's face was in a daze. He stopped his fist, but did not retract it, and the tremor of his body became more and more obvious. Can't understand the reason of fear, but there is a feeling of rejoicing after the disaster. This contradictory feeling is like a saw cutting steel and making sour and piercing noises, which is very uncomfortable. This is Nian, the insurmountable boundary between Superman and ordinary people. Just a word or even a glance can cause ordinary people to die. Oh, my uncle is so obedient and obedient. It's a pity that I don't have any candy, otherwise I will reward you with one. Luo's cold expression gradually faded, turning to a hippie smile. He let go of the hand that caught Marza's right fist, leaped lightly and jumped onto Marza's outstretched sturdy arm. Then he bent his knees and squatted, making his eyes and Marza was straight and right. Looking at Luo's smiling face, Marza's eyes quivered, and drops of sweat leaked from his forehead to his cheeks. The reason for fear is practical and incomprehensible, and the answer that can be drawn should be very simple, that is, the child in front of him who seems to be only about 10 years old is very dangerous and he cannot provoke him. Uncle. Luo stretched out his hand and patted Marza on the head, lowered his voice and smiled, "Don't show up in front of us in the future, can you?" Marza's face trembled slightly, and his mouth slowly opened and closed, but he couldn't say a complete sentence. The surrounding Meteor Street residents all looked shocked. The moment before, Marza's fist was very firm, and the desire to kill Luo was undoubtedly evident, but when Luo said stop, Marza stopped immediately. He fisted, and didn't move. The most outrageous thing is that Luo patted Marza's head with his hands in the same way as a pet, but the latter didn't react at all. Combined with cognition, this scene is incredible. It is like Little Red Riding Hood patting the head of a giant bear that is 100 times more ferocious than a big bad wolf, but the giant bear did not tear Little Red Riding Hood at all. They probably know the character of Marza, so they really can't understand the scene before them. Could it be that the little white face did something? Marge also couldn't understand. With Marza's character, in a state of anger, how could he listen to Luo honestly and immediately stop acting, and Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com would not let people slap their heads in such a shame. She pressed. I walked over to the doubts rising in my heart. What did you do? Marge put the thin line away, looking confused. Uncle, if you don't speak, you will take it as your default. Luo stretched out his hand again and patted Marza's cheek. Then he jumped down and looked at Marge with a smile. He stopped moving for some reason, and I don't know why. Do I look stupid? Marge stared at Luo. Ha! Luo's mouth twitched, smiling slightly embarrassed. That, can I move? Marza really wanted to find a place to get in. He looked at Luo carefully, and in order to leave quickly, he mustered up the courage to say this very hard. Luo looked up at him, and after thinking for a moment, he said lightly, before we leave, you should keep this action. Maki frowned slightly, and the doubts in her heart became more intense. She glanced at Luo and then at Marza, who seemed to be suppressing fear, and suddenly said, he is terrified of you. Luo smiled and didn't say a word. In fact, he probably knew the reason why the other party became like this. It was nothing more than the result of mind. If you tell him not to move, he won't move. Maki squeezed her finger bones suddenly, with a calm expression on her face. Luo shrugged and said, you can say so, ignore him, let's go to the landfill quickly. Well, then I know. Marge nodded slightly, her petite body suddenly jumped up, and a volley of whip kicked on Marza's right cheek, and a muffled sound was actually kicking the tall Marza out of 1 meter. The distance from left to right. Luo opened his mouth subconsciously, staring blankly at the little Lolita who was exuding a cold breath in front of him. This kick made the audience silent. Luo stretched out his hand and wiped the sweat that didn't exist on his forehead, thinking that he still underestimated the power of Marge, and could kick such a strong adult 1 meter away, just like a little loli kicking a bear. The picture feel is very shocking. The crowds watching melon eaters were all looking at Machi with a frosty face. The so-called forest is big and there are all kinds of birds. Among the people present there are many lilicons. Marge's body and appearance are so good that he will inevitably be seen by a guy who is heavily loli controlling, but because of the iron rule placed on the table, he can only hide his mind first. At this time, see the violence displayed by Marge. Means, cannot help but secretly retreat. Marza's physical fitness is good, but he suffered a kick unsuspectingly. When he landed, one cheek was already swollen. Maki took a few steps forward, jumped on Marza's chest, squatted down and pulled Marza's collar up, and forced the back of his head off the ground. Maki, just. Seeing Maki's follow-up actions, Luo said the last half of don't waste time before he was pushed back by Maki's don't talk. Luo was speechless. Marza, since Luo has not been expelled, it means that the parliament has accepted Luo, you know what it means. Marza's eyes pierced Marza. Marza's cheeks are swollen, and half of his lips are crooked. After hearing what Marge said, he knew that saying extra words would only make himself worse, so he gritted his teeth and didn't speak. He also knew what Marge said, but after Luo came to Meteor Street, he stayed at home and did not show enough sense of presence, so he thought that even if Luo was killed, the Council of Elders would not trouble him. Whoever thought that the original motive was to find Marge trouble, but he actually kicked an iron plate. Seeing that Marza didn't speak, she pushed hard with the hand that was pulling the collar, causing Marza's head to fall heavily on the ground. After that, she got up and looked down at Marza, who was grinning because the back of her head fell, and said indifferently, I'll do it for myself. After he stomped Marza's chest, he jumped down and picked up the gas mask that had fallen on the ground. After that, he turned and walked towards the dumbfounded Luo and said, "Let's go, Wojin and Nobunaga are still waiting." "We? Great." Luo glanced at Marza, who was lying motionless on the ground, and followed Marge, who had already walked a few steps out. Marge's behavior just now seemed really cold, but it was just to protect him. Maybe this is Meteor Street, like the guy who kills when he doesn't agree, he will definitely encounter more in the future. Luo Momo walked side by side with March, and suddenly thought that in 10 years later, March would become a murderous person. There was an urge to talk to March all night. Well, it was just simple. Open up and chat. Wrong, Wojin and Nobunaga? Isn't that the other two members of the Mirage Brigade? Luo suddenly noticed the two names that Ma Chi just said. Could it be that the other two people with Ma Chi that day were Wojin and Nobunaga? Have you met this time? Luo frowned slightly. He also planned to keep March away from the members of the Phantom Brigade, but he went bankrupt before the plan was implemented. Even if I know the plot, it is at least 10 years away from the beginning of the plot. When the Phantom Brigade debuted at Yukiksen for the first time, March looked like he was in his 20s. The actual age is unknown, and neither know when the Mirage Brigade was created. There is too little information. If you want to keep Marge away from the Phantom Brigade, you have to take a step and take a step. Before that, you only need to concentrate on improving your strength. Luo was thinking because of the two names of Wojin and Nobunaga. Luo, where are you from? March asked suddenly while walking. Hey! Luo recovered, but couldn't answer the question. Where did come from? I told you that I would travel from the Earth to an anime inexplicably, would you believe it? Because the question is really to the point, Luo not only couldn't answer, he couldn't break the topic, so he could only remain silent. Marky glanced at Luo who was silent, and withdrew his gaze silently. As long as Luo didn't want to say it, he didn't get entangled in this issue. Instead, he said, no matter where you come from, what are the rules of conduct before coming? Now that I have chosen to stay on Meteor Street, I have to adapt to Meteor Street. At this point, Maki paused, and his tone became much flatter, do not harm the lives of your compatriots. Although it is one of the iron rules, it is not absolute. It cannot guarantee the safety of anyone's life. If someone wants to hurt you, they have to pay back twice to make the other person aware of your capital. Luo listened carefully, and suddenly sighed faintly. He tilted his head to look at Marge's profile, and his eyes quietly showed pity. He couldn't imagine what kind of environment Marge had experienced in order to have such a growth in concept. You must know that she is only 10 years old now. You can just abolish him, and don't look at me with that kind of look. Marge's gaze was still placed in front, but he felt Luo's pitying gaze. Luo shrugged, turned his head and said, I had the same plan, provided that he hurt me. After all, I have just arrived, so it's better to keep a low profile. Low-key. Maki raises his eyebrows and retaliates with the middle finger, which is not a low-key approach. Here, only high-profile actions can make people around you realize that you are powerful, so that they dare not come to provoke you. Maki's eyelids drooped slightly, and said lightly, just like just now, if you don't get a little interest from the provocative person, others will think you are a soft persimmon that anyone can need. I think, a word that scares the other person to even move is handsome enough, and the deterrence produced must be very good. I see. Facing the teachings of the Aboriginal Maggie, Luo naturally did not dare to say these words, so he could only nod his head. It takes time for good young people in a harmonious society to adapt to the special environment of Meteor Street. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. The two walked for a while, and they saw the outline of the exit, where two people in protective suits stood. Maki looked at the two people from a distance, and suddenly said, pity is the cheapest emotion here, I hope you remember this. Then why are you willing to take me back, and also provide board and lodging, and even teach me the lingua franca? Luo couldn't hold back this time, and the thoughts in his heart came out directly. March turned her head, showing a flat smile, and Luo heard the most incredible answer. Intuition. The cold little Lori stretched out her index finger to the corner of her eyebrow, and answered like this. At this time, Luo Yufa felt that March could not be regarded as a 9-year-old little Lolita. People from Meteor Street could not be recognized by common sense. After Luo and March left for about 5 minutes, Marza dared to get up. At this time, the fear that Yin Luo had germinated in a word had disappeared like smoke, so anger and hatred took the place of fear. The people watching the excitement have not yet dispersed. Seeing Marza get up, the few good people started to laugh at Marza. Marza, didn't you eat today? It's really a spectacular sight to be kicked by the little March. I'm blinded by you. I think that little white face is a bit wicked, and even a single sentence makes Mal dare not move. I think I was frightened by the look in Xiao Bai's eyes. Marza, what did that little white face do to you? You are scared. Listening to the unscrupulous ridicule around, Marza lowered his head, and resentment flashed in his eyes. He ignored the people around him and walked straight towards the alley in the building complex. How can he bear this breath? Besides, he still has a backing. Meteor Street is not a city. It is not an exaggeration to say that its exit is a gap. As long as you leave the building complex, even if you leave Meteor Street, you have to walk 1 kilometer to the landfill. Wojin saw Marky and Luo from a distance, a few hundred meters apart, and he shouted directly with a loud voice, Marky, you're late. Your voice is too loud. Nobunaga leaned against the wall of a house, expressing his dissatisfaction. Oh! Wojin embraced his arms and looked at March and Luo who were coming here, without paying any attention. Your reaction is too plain, right? Anyway, you have to be a little conscious and say you will pay attention to something next time. Nobunaga stared. Wojin curled his lips and said, I'm just like this. You can't change it. If you are dissatisfied, then break my vocal cords. Hey! Nobunaga's eyes suddenly became like a knife, and his right hand climbed directly on the handle of the wooden knife leaning against the wall, and said seriously, this is what you said, so don't blame me for being impolite. Wojin did not speak, but turned his head to face Nobunaga with a big grin, his sharp teeth gave off a hint of chill. On the street, hundreds of meters away, Marge didn't realize that Wojin and Nobunaga would have a routine trouble again. Wojin hates people being late, it's troublesome now. Hearing Wojin's loud voice, Marge's eyes immediately turned into dead fish eyes. She accidentally ignored the matter, otherwise she wouldn't say anything in March. Too much time was wasted on the body. What will happen then? Luo asked curiously, looking at the conspicuous explosive head at the exit. The punishment is to wrestle with him. Marge sighed softly. Hey! Luo was taken aback, and asked, have you been punished? Maki replied helplessly, once there was a pain in his right arm for a whole week. No, I really got it because of this bastard. Luo felt that Machi and Wojin were far apart in age, appearance, and figure, especially when Machi was petite and exquisite, and he didn't know how Wojin made the move. No. Luo suddenly thought of the key point and asked, you can't be tough with that guy, right? Although it is punishment, things like wrist wrenching are usually a contest between men and men. Because of the face relationship, the desire to win is very strong, so basically they will do their best. However, if you have only won the petite and exquisite Marge, then there will be no sense of accomplishment at all, and Marge doesn't seem to have to smash with Wojin, and just pretend to be killed by a spike. It doesn't take a week of arm pain. Ro mostly pretended to forget the fact that he lost to March in power some time ago. Hearing Luo's question after guessing, March nodded. Luo suddenly smiled bitterly, and said, you really want to be strong, what is the difference between a little girl and a stupid man? Maki glared at him and said, I hate to admit defeat. Besides, if I don't try my best, Wojin will be even more dissatisfied. Luo was speechless, stretched out his index finger and rubbed his forehead. He has a basic understanding of Maki. He looks so petite and cute, but in fact he has a very masculine personality. The two speeded up their pace. After getting closer, Luo Jian gradually saw the looks of Wojin and Nobunaga. There was a big gap between them and their memories. After all, that was the image more than 10 years later. Wojin has a dark complexion, with a conspicuous black explosive head, is tall, and his arms and legs are very strong, but he is still far from being as strong as a dozen years later. Nobunaga has a straight braid on his head. He has beautiful features and a pale complexion. He is at the extremes of Wojin. He looks like an oily niche. God knows how the decadent uncle came from 10 years later. This is Wojin and Nobunaga's first impression of Luo. They can only sigh again that the power of the pig knife is terrible, and the two men are dangerous people. Speaking of which, the more dangerous guy is also in Meteor Street. Luo suddenly thought of Hisuo, a person who can hunt and kill candidates in the hunter test. Hey? By the way, the two men seem to be fighting. Nobunaga held a wooden knife in his hand, and stared at Wojin with his eyebrows. Crack! Wojin's finger bones are different from ordinary people, and he squeezed his hands together and made a crisp bone sound. The atmosphere in the arena gradually became tense, and it seemed that the fight might start in the next second. It's here again, you two. Machi looked helpless with one hand on her hips. Luo Zi was observing Wojin and Nobunaga from close range. The members of the Phantom Brigade were all masters with the ability to read, but now it is obvious that Maggie has not yet come into contact with the ability to read, and Wojin and Nobunaga are in a state of onslaught. He feels very dangerous. But, because of this, Luo is convinced that Wojin and Nobunaga have not yet come into contact with mindfulness. If it weren't for both of them to enter the state of preparing for war, he would really not be able to judge. The reason for believing is that Wojin and Nobunaga clearly entered the state of preparing for war but did not use Zhang. Nobunaga, if you fight, I will use a thread to find a way to stop your wooden knife. Marquis's face suddenly became cold when the two of them ignored her. Why me? Nobunaga's condensed momentum suddenly vented, and he looked at March with a dazed expression. Ha! Wojin burst into laughter with no face. The slightly condensed air slowly dispersed, and the tense atmosphere of swordsmanship disappeared without a trace. Is it possible to unconsciously trigger the aura without touching the ability of mind? Surely these two people will soon be able to reach the threshold. Romer thought. He stood silently on the side, like an outsider. In a sense, this is the first time he and Wojin Nobunaga have met. In fact, this is the second meeting. When they first met, Wojin and Nobunaga were wearing gas masks, and they didn't agree with Marge's decision at the time, so they didn't give him a good face. They separated after returning to Meteor Street, and they never came to Ma. Kijia. Remove your wooden sword, the battle will end in the fastest way, saving time. Faced with Nobunaga's question, March gave a serious reply. Nobunaga puts away the wooden knife. Yu reads www.yukanshu.com patted his forehead with his hand, with an expression of I'm taking you. Wojin heard that, the laughter was even more rampant, and he reached out his hand and patted Nobunaga on the shoulder, and laughed. The fist is the best weapon for a man, understand? Get out! Nobunaga slapped Wojin's hand away angry. Wojin was not annoyed, and suddenly looked at Marge, grinning. Marge, you are 2 minutes late. According to the rules, you have to wrestle with me once. If anyone loses, he will give up 50% of today's gain. Maki gave a wry smile. 2 minutes, if I remember correctly that time, it should be 10 seconds late. Only 2 minutes, does a big man care about that? Luo Lima was unhappy when he heard the words behind Wojin. Even if he wrestled his wrist, he still had to give up 50% of the gain? In any case, Marge loses, just forget it. He went straight forward a few steps, crossing in front of March. "Oh, it's you." Wojin seemed to have just noticed Luo, looked at him sideways, and reacted coldly. Nobunaga looked at Luo and said, "Boy, 1 second is considered late. This is not care, but rules, understand?" Seeing the reaction of these two people, Luo smiled, but not annoyed, and calmly said, "Okay, let me fight with you." No matter how much I said, it would be better to crush Wojin's arm. Hearing Luo's words, Nobunaga suddenly became interested, but Wojin was disdainful. He knew that Luo's power was not as good as March. "Luo, don't make trouble." March brought Lola back, and then she saw the slightly weird reaction of the three of them, and she suddenly became puzzled. "Don't make trouble," in this tone, it seems that it shouldn't come out of Marge's mouth. Luo, Nobunaga and Wojin looked at her as if they had met Marge again.